And as I've mentioned, I'm a behavioral economist by education from Bocconi University in Italy. And it's very interesting to see how much we can learn about behavioral change actually looking at babies learning how to crawl. And Isabella is exactly in that phase. It's super interesting because if we take a step back and we want to talk about culture in an organization, when we talk about culture, the best definition that I've ever heard is culture is what your teams do while you're not watching. And so in this phrase, there's a lot summed up. First of all, it's about behavior and not about what we say. It's also about what people do, not only when they're instructed to do, but when there's no supervision. And eventually something that implicitly we can build and change. And it's not easy at all, though. And so getting back to the child analogy, whenever we look at behavioral change, and therefore behavioral change is what we need for a cultural change, we can see that while babies learn to crawl, there's a number of factors that need to be in place. And these are exactly the same factors that need to be in place if we want to change a culture in our company towards an AI-first one. Anyone can guess, or maybe based on their own experience, what is it that is needed for a baby to learn to crawl? It's a bunch of factors, 2, 3. Anyone can guess? Alex?
Well, they need to have a goal, they need to want to get something.
Yes. So you need, first of all, to spread toys around. You have to create this environment of comfort. You need to, have a prize for them to go after, right? You need to create an incentive. Great point. What else? Safe space, right? They will never do it at first. They will, turn on their back at first. They will not be able to crawl, and they need a safe space to crawl. And there's a third thing, which is extremely important. Encouragement, which is related to the toy part. The third big thing is that, think about it, they're super comfortable at age, belly up, right? That's how they stay. They are not able to turn. So it's the parent, mom or dad, that needs to turn them back with their belly down to do 5, 10, 15 minutes a day of what is called tummy time. It's super interesting because if we look at these three big things, we understand that actually in order to change cultures within an organization, we need to do three main things, which are, first of all, create a safe space for people to implement these new behaviors. Second, we need to create an environment of comfort and incentives. And third, especially us as leaders, need to create this movement where people leave their comfort zone, belly up as a baby, I don't want to turn around, and put them into an uncomfortable position. Because the uncomfort is exactly where people develop new skills and new behaviors. And whenever we translate that to an AI-first culture, there's a great study that I encourage everyone to read. It's called Investigating the Relationship Between AI and Trust in Human-AI Collaboration. And human-AI collaboration is exactly what we want, is exactly related to not only AI adoption by non-technical teams, but overall, it is related to the way we want to think about people, collaborate and not feel substituted by AI. And so, summing up this report, it says that basically, whenever we look at the successful AI cultural transformations and high degrees of collaboration between humans and AI, especially the non-technical ones, it's attributed to two big dimensions, factors at least across two big dimensions. The first is what we can call the cognitive dimension, right? Whenever we look at the perception that people have, the cognitive one, the way they think about AI, we need to focus on minimizing the interaction complexity. So people sometimes are afraid by the supposed complexities of AI. Now it's getting easier and easier to use the tools, but still, it's not only the complexity of using the tool, but of interacting collaboratively within the organization. Because the second dimension of the cognitive perception is high coordination costs. Well, maybe marketing creates some agents. We'll see more now with all the, co-work and all the OpenClaw tools. Now, people and non-technical teams have the initiative to create their own tools. And so if we don't create an environment for collaboration, it will be hard. Why? Because there will be high coordination costs. So the focus here on the cognitive aspect is that we need to minimize the interaction complexity and the coordination costs. And the second big pillar, though, is the way people feel about AI, not only about how they think about AI. It's what the study says. It's called the emotional perception of AI. And here we want to maximize comfort and enjoyment of the tool. So people feel familiar, feel safe while using it, which is related to what Edmundo said. You need to create a safe space. And so when we go back to the analogy of the child learning to crawl, we need to, of course, put people outside of their comfort zone at low risk, at low cost, which is reduce interaction complexity. We need to reduce also these coordination costs that we'll see how to do all of that. And third, last but not least, as much as with the kid you put around toys that they like so that they crawl after them, we need to do something very similar for teams because they will need to experiment more, and with experimenting more, they will fail more, okay? And so, the first element then to drive an AI-ready culture, an AI-first culture, is we need people to use AI. That's supposedly the first big goal. We'll see it's not the only one, and by the way, it's actually a risky one if we just say that being AI-first is having people use AI as much as possible. But a company that did this really well is Avery Dennison. It's a material science company. They do, their competitor to 3M and so on, and they've been nominated one of the best or most AI-ready companies. Now, their CIO, Nick Colisto, won the CIO 100 awards in 2025 because at some point they also had the highest Gemini user base installed in the world, 22,000 people using it. They've been very pioneering in the B2B industrial manufacturing sector. And something that's really interesting, so again, maximizing for use of AI is the first big step of AI first culture. And what's interesting, and I can relate to this company, is that back in the days, already in 2022, we were working with them. I'm the host of a podcast that we've been running in Latin America, both for the Brazilian Avery Dennison and for the Spanish-speaking Avery Dennison. Back in 2022, we were working on a podcast for their employees. It's available on Spotify, training them and preparing them for the next big wave of innovation and technology, and therefore nudging them to feel more comfort and understanding. It's not only about the technicalities of AI, but it's about having people feel readier for that. And so you will see there's a whole lot of things to do on the educational side. But again, if we consider an AI-first culture just a culture or an organization that maximizes the use of AI, we'll have some troubles. Why? We will have people having access to great tools, but not necessarily being prepared for them. And so there's a number of risks that we need to point out and that we'll have to work on. The first one is definitely that in case we don't train people and prepare them to actually critically collaborate with AI, we'll find ourselves in a situation of overdependence on AI, right? Automating tasks and extracting insights from meeting notes and so on is great. But if we develop and have teams that just copy and paste what AI spits out and maybe spread biases or hallucinations, we'll have problems. Also because this overdependence has been shown by the MIT Media Lab famous report that actually lowers brain engagement on behalf of our teams. And that's a big risk. They did a study, 3 sets of students. One didn't have access to any tools. Second one could only do research on Google. Third one had access to ChatGPT. Third group had the lowest brain engagement while solving the same homework that the other groups had. So it's proven. And this overdependence, again, can bring to other risks, as we've said, falling prey of hallucinations or biases. Hallucinations to the point it becomes expensive. I don't know who's seen Deloitte, the big consultancy firm, having to reimburse 300,000 Australian dollars to the Australian government because the Australian government got a report that was produced by Deloitte and they pointed to hallucinations in the bibliographical references. And that's something that we don't want to have. We always want to keep the human in the loop, which also, again, reminds us AI first is not using as much AI as possible, right? And last but not least, among many other things, explainability, right? There's a bunch of problems related to that. I start using AI, but I don't know how I got to that outcome. And if I'm a bank, maybe, and I start using AI to approve credit or not, and then my customer gets to me, knocks on my door, goes to my, physical branch and says, why was I denied my loan? And the manager doesn't know how to explain. Well, we'll have trust issues and reputational problems and so on. So we started understanding, first of all, it's very much needed that people start using AI because we all know its advantages, but we also have to be aware of its risks. And so now we'll get to a model that I'm going to propose where we'll understand that basically there's 4 big pillars that I advocate for when it comes to creating an AI-first culture. And we'll see for each of these pillars what's our role as CTOs and IT managers. So the model is based on what I developed over the last couple of years, a model of mapping out areas of impact of AI in any organization, depending on the sector. So if we put on one axis, sort of like the use of AI, on the one side, the more predictive use of AI, and on the other one, the generative, predictive being generating insights from data. Could be real-time or historical data, and generative is, text to whatever content we want. And on the other axis, we put the internal or external use of AI. I would sum up the areas of opportunities of use of AI within our organization in 4 big ones. The first one is what I call tell me. The applications that tell us things, tell our teams things. It's the use of AI, internally, predictive mostly, to generate insights and predictions, eventually to help us make better decisions. And we'll see what does this mean for an AI-first culture. The second one, when we go towards the predictive use of AI towards our customer, it could be our internal customer, the employee, then we have what I call tell my customer. The use of conversational AI, hyper-personalized customer journeys, or even HR tech tools can improve the internal customer experience. That's the second big area of application. Whenever we pivot towards the generative AI, instead of just telling us things, it starts to do things on our behalf or for us. And that's what I call do for me. It's the word of automations and augmentation, which is a word that I know you're familiar, but we'll dive deeper a little bit into our discussion. And last but not least, whenever we use generative AI for external purposes, that's what I call do for my customer. It's about AI helping us to generate new products and new services, what I call creating products or services under the AI lens. And we'll see some examples of it. So this model is really important because for each one of these big areas of applications, we have a pillar of AI-first culture. And the first big pillar that stems from the tell me area of application is that in order to have an AI-first culture, we need to work on data that is good enough, and we'll see what it means good enough, in order to change the decision-making, the collective decision-making within the organization from the reactive decision-making that we have today, which tends to look at historical data and compare with our current data, which is like driving a car looking at a rear view mirror instead of the glass in front of us, to a predictive one. And I'll touch upon a couple of examples briefly. And I know that each one of you in your organization has been seeing an explosion of data over the last years. Whenever we look at collective data in the world, over the last 10 years, it has been generating more than 90% of data since the beginning of times, which points to a fact that it's not only about having access to data, but it's about how we manage this data, right? Sometimes it's just too much data. But whenever we're able to use data well, and we'll see in a second what does this mean for us, CTOs, we are able to change decision-making. I know some of you work in healthcare, for example, and we see a great example of some healthcare leaders, such as the Mayo Clinic, now positioning themselves as smart hospitals. What's a smart hospital? It's like, I'm not, at least in the future, but already starting now, gonna make money from treating diseases, but I want to make money from prevention. And whenever we look at CB Insights ranking of the AI readiness index of the biggest healthcare companies in the US, Mayo Clinic is first with 5 stars in innovation and 4 stars in execution of AI projects internally. And most of them are exactly the projects that help us change the decision-making from, okay, I wait for my patient to come here with symptoms, to I want to create value to the patient by making much more predictive decision-making. So what's our role as CTOs in this? As CTOs, we need to be the architects of this AI-ready data. So the first big pillar for an AI-first culture is that it needs to have AI-ready data. And way too often we see companies jumping towards implementing the tools and having a great tech stack, but they forgot about the need to implement great data. Centralized or federated systems. Clean and complete, because incomplete data leads to generalization problems. Governed and secure, because that's also another big problem. Unbiased data. Again, the example of a bank, if traditionally my branch managers would, look at the person and say, I'm not giving, loans to this type of person from this social class, and I feed the algorithm with this data, the algorithm will discriminate these people. Real-time, and of course, not just historical data, and structured for AI training and consumption, working on tagged, labeled, and data with metadata that actually feeds and trains the right algorithms and improves them. So first things first, we want to have an AI-first culture, then we need to work on AI-ready data. And that's our role as CTOs, the architects of data. The second big thing, though, we've said, it's not only about AI telling us things, it's about helping do things better. And that's where we need to focus on a second big pillar of an AI-first culture, which is designing the workflows and turning them from just pure automation, which is the clear and easy to see promise of AI, to augmentation. And I'll explain the difference in a second. Who has ever watched the movie The Hedgehog Day? It's a movie where Bill Murray actually plays a journalist. You'll recognize in a moment. He plays a journalist that wakes up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and he goes through a lot of things during that day. And he hates that day. He can't wait for the day to be over. And he goes back to sleep, and he's just looking forward to getting his first plane back home. And he wakes up, and he notices he's going through the same day of yesterday, the same day again. And this is in a loop every day, and he cannot leave this loop, endless loop, up until something happens, and no spoilers. I want you to watch the movie if you haven't, until something happens. And I used to work at L'Oreal when I watched first this movie, and I thought, oh my God, how much does this looks like my day-to-day at work, right? Isn't it? Our day-to-day at work, and even, other areas day-to-day at work, looks like as if we're all modern-day Sisyphuses. For who knows the Greek mythological story of Sisyphus, the man that was condemned to push this, huge rock up a hill just to see it fall back again at night and do that over and over again. And so I started doing some research. Am I alone? Am I the only one feeling like that? And I understood, no, I'm not, because Asana did a research and did a global survey and showed that actually 60% of most people's work is what they call work about work. What is work about work? It's exactly those responding email, crafting that PowerPoint, transcribing meeting notes, inviting people to that meeting. And what I understood is that whenever I saw the promise of AI, that it's not that these tasks are not important anymore. It's not that they shouldn't be done. They shouldn't be done by us anymore. And they should be done by AI. And that's kind of obvious, and now more and more, not only us, but our teams see the potential for that. And whenever we look at the impact of this repetition, is one of the big causes of burnouts on teams. And so the promise here is that AI manages, according to an Accenture report, to automate many of these tasks. Independent on the industry, there's some with more automation, high potential for automation, which is the green part, and some less, but from 30, 35 to 50, 55% of tasks could be automated. So imagine us, and especially in non-technical areas, gaining back 50 to 55% of their time. Would be amazing. And that's why people are starting to automate more and more. But then there's a catch here. It's not only about automating repetitive tasks. It's very much also about what we do with the time that we gain back. Because there's something called, in economics, the productivity paradox, which is we might feel that we're being more productive because we're automating all these tasks, but the problem is that our colleague is doing the same. The problem is that teams at our competitor are doing the same because they're easy to automate, and this is the tip of the iceberg. So we think we're being more productive, but we're not actually, because the bar raises. So the real differentiator is augmentation, is how we not only substitute tasks through AI, but how we use AI to increase the quality of the tasks that we still keep doing. And here's a great example from a Brazilian bank, and maybe Felipe, let me guess, you're Banco Inter, or? Yes, I would imagine. Unfortunately, I mentioned a competitor, but I love Banco Inter. I've been doing some work with you guys. I'll mention a competitor, Nubank. So Nubank said, okay, compared to the traditional banks, which are automating through chatbots their contacts with customer care, and if I have a problem, usually in Bradesco or the other big banks, it's a chatbot that attends me. What's the problem is that this chatbot not always understands me. It brings me back to the beginning. And people, are thinking, I wish I was speaking to someone, like a real human being. And that happens the whole time. We automate, but it's not really the perfect solution. And so Nubank said, look, I'm not going to automate this step in the customer journey. I'm going to augment the power of my human representatives through a partnership with OpenAI where they developed a panel internally. And maybe, Felipe, you guys have something similar? Very nice. I know Guilherme from the team, so I heard you guys work on something similar. Where partnering with OpenAI, what did they do? They developed a panel that uses AI to empower the human attendant. How? As soon as a person writes to Nubank, the human attendant gets a summary of the history of that customer, gets a prediction of what the motive, what the reason of the contact might be, and suggests answers. So this is not automation, this is augmentation, and the real power lies in how we use AI to empower the unsubstitutable tasks that need the human touch. And that's really important. So the real opportunity here is that, because especially in the world where, as we mentioned before, the cost of access to technical knowledge and expertise is decreasing, we have to rethink what's our role as IT teams and CTOs. Because again, if I take so long maybe to, even for marketing, to create a landing page that marketing needs, and I tell them, look, it's gonna be online in 3 days, well, they will turn to gamma.app and create their landing page in a minute. Or, a new application, they'll go to Lovable and or maybe use Claude Cowork for an agent. And so the challenge here is our teams, the non-technical ones, are having more and more access to a knowledge that was exclusive to us. So we have to rethink also our role here a little bit. We need to be the curators and designers of the ecosystem through which people access and use AI. And so here's the point, in which also tools are built, deployed, and governed. Here we need to have an approved model stack also for security purposes. We need to, of course, obviously think about our LLM strategy, but also private language models or small language models, depending on the industry we're in. We need to, create tiers of risks and classifications. We need to have an agentic orchestration, because if our teams start developing and creating agents totally disconnected one to the other, we'll have problems in the near future. Vibe coding governance as well, there might be security breaches and so on, API and integration standards and so on. And here's a great example coming from Walmart. I don't know if anyone works there or has friends working there, but they created a nice and interesting agentic orchestration structure. They created 4 macro agents that are basically the one governing all the nano agents, and people have to go through that in order to develop it. It's no cloud, it's no OpenClaw and stuff like that, but they created at least the architecture for people to access all of that, which was our exclusive knowledge and exclusive access to AI tools development. Great. Third, remember our matrix? Well, the third one is do for my customer, right? We were following from, tell me, do for me, do for my customer. And here the interesting thing is that we're shifting away from creating products and services that are very transactional to using AI to create better experiences. And let me give you an example of a company that is very traditional, apparently not so much related to the AI transformation, but that I deem one of the most AI-ready and most AI-first companies, which is John Deere. I don't know if anyone, I guess many of you know John Deere, but what's interesting from John Deere is that, of course, it's been more than 200 years they build, manufacture, and sell farming equipment, right? And so a couple of months ago, I had the chance to speak here at actually not the Marlins, but the Hard Rock Cafe, the Dolphin Stadium, to their dealership. And before stepping on stage, one of the John Deere executives tells me, Andrea, just a reminder, please on stage in front of our dealers, do not say that we're a farming equipment company. And I'm like, what do you mean? That's what you've been doing for 200 years. And they're like, no. We don't consider ourselves a farming equipment company anymore. We now consider ourselves a company that sells intelligence to the farmer. Look, they said, and Carlos knows it well, you sell these solutions. They have so much IoT embedded in their equipment that the real value comes from the softwares they sell through myjohndeere.com. In 2022, they already set the objective of making more than 10% of their revenues coming from the sale of software, which, by the way, is easier to sell, is more scalable, it's more profitable than selling farming equipment. And not only they overcame this objective, but now they're in the best moment of their history, especially after the pandemic's boom, going towards online solutions. And it's interesting because here we see that, again, AI has been used not only for internal purposes, but it has been used to actually create what, again, I like to call products and services under an AI lens. That, again, do not only provide a transactional solution, I'm selling you something, but I'm creating an experience, a journey for you in order to make better decisions in this case. And so what's our role as CTOs? We need to be translators of this tech capability to real business values. We need to be the partners of business areas, not only to produce tech tools, but to be drivers of, okay, what can I do in order to improve the customer experience with these solutions? So cross-functional AI alignment, products and services under AI lens, as I've already mentioned, AI-powered touchpoints across customer journey. And so getting involved in the customer journey, understanding the customer, looking at data, revenue attribution, very important, because otherwise how we justify AI projects that have a high investment up front and then, what's the ROI? That's a question that CEOs and CFOs always ask us, right? So revenue attribution, very important to work across and close to functional areas, and so on. Great. But last but not least, there's the human aspect of it, which, by the way, is the most important one. The fourth big shift or pillar of an AI-first culture is that we need to take care of the people and shift away a hyper-focus that we've inherited from an industrial revolution on hard skills to a new focus, or at least new complement. Of course, hard skills are important, but to a new focus on the soft skills that are actually the result of a cognitive revolution we're undergoing. And so, talking about the impact of AI on our hard skills, there's this great theorem that I don't know if anyone knows, Scott Aaronson. He's an ethicist of AI. He used to work at OpenAI. I don't know if he still does. But anyways, he crafted what he calls the game over theory. And he says, if we look at any task that has a measurable and objective measure of success, it's just a matter of time before AI actually overcomes our own ability, human ability to perform it. And why so? Let's break it down. It's very important, the objective measure of success part. Because when there's an objective measure of success, I have data points. I know whether I passed or no a language exam. I know whether I'm able to code or not. I know whether I'm good at Excel or not. But I cannot really measure whether I'm empathetic, whether I'm collaborative, whether I speak well. It's much more intangible, right? The hard skills are measurable. And whenever I can measure an outcome, I have data points I can feed an AI algorithm with. So we're poised to lose on everything that is technical, that is hard skills based. And it's not because of our fault, it's because of AI's unlimited processing power thanks to NVIDIA's GPUs. And so here we see a strong impact of that in the job market, getting to extreme situations where, and I'm good friends of Eduardo Frias, who I think should join this forum. He's the CTO, field CTO at Shopify. He lives here in Miami. And Shopify made the headlines with also a little bit of backlash when Tobias Lütke said, look, starting from now, new recruitment policy here. You're not creating a position, an open position on LinkedIn before vetting it through me and justifying why we need a human being and why could not this be done by an AI. And so at first I thought, well, we're all going to lose our jobs, right? But then I understood that AI is not just coming straight away for our jobs. AI is coming first for our tasks. The repeatable ones, the familiar ones, the data-driven ones, the ones with measurable success or failure. Now, if our day-to-day at work is made only by those tasks, well, then AI is coming for our job. But if we complement that with the skills and tasks that are not so measurable, that are much more human-based, well, that's where we are going to thrive. And in this part, particularly, I want to focus on two roles of the CTO. The CTO, of course, needs to develop its people and work as an advocate of AI towards other areas, but also needs to understand that there's two big things that need to be in place for that to happen. It gets slightly back to the kids analogy at the beginning. The first thing is how do I change culture? We've said it's not about saying people what to do. You need to change behavior, and we know we don't change behavior just because someone tells us to, right? Oh, be AI first, and now just, use the right tools and so on. So the first way we change behavior, human to human, is through the mechanism of reciprocation. And I want you to think about the following. If I go down the street here in Wynwood and someone that I don't know, never seen in my life, is walking towards me, what's the only thing I can do that guarantees me this person is going to smile at me? Only if you smile first, right? And that's funny because, well, not always, depending on the city. But here in Miami, usually, depends on the city. There's a 99% guarantee, right? And so what I mean by that is the CTO needs to take care of AI ambassadors, especially in leadership, that actually are the promoters of this change. Because I'll show you something very interesting. A Deloitte Trust ID Workforce Index that looks at trust in AI and the use of AI and the relationship to trust is super interesting. Look at that. Shadow AI is basically using non-approved AI tools at the workplace. Who uses it most? Senior leaders. And where is it most concentrated? In the tech area, because we're tech savvy, and of course we can, find the workarounds and so on. So if we're not the first ones, and especially our teams, and especially leaders of non-technical areas, to actually incorporate some of these behaviors, again, being the architect of data, understanding and always thinking about products and services under the AI lens and so on, it will be impossible for people out there, workforce out there, spread out and not feeling the day-to-day at the company to actually do that first. So we need to be the first ones to do and not only to say. And the second big thing is, again, getting back to the issue of trust. And here I wanted to touch upon what really happened recently with the clash between Anthropic and the Pentagon, Department of Defense. I don't know if you've noticed, for who has watched the Super Bowl, but Anthropic ran 2 ads. And 2 ads that were looking to basically say, I'm a trustworthy AI company. I'm not going to sell ads like OpenAI is going to do, right? And they spent $16 million on those 2 ads. It generated some positive effect? Yeah, okay. What really, though, generated the best positive effect for Anthropic over the last month or so? Saying no to Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon and Department of Defense, saying, I want full access to, and I don't want red flags in your AI algorithm. And that involved saying no to a contract of $200 million. And that really made me think about, maybe this is the final part of our speech, which is the role of CTO again, and maybe the most important one, is that we become guardians of trust. Because if, getting back to the example, like non-technical areas can go to Claude Cowork and start building their skills and agents. They go to Laudable, build their applications. They can create landing pages on Gamma and so on. We need to reshift and see, okay, what's the value that we provide? And the value that we provide, especially in a world where trust in AI is not that high, what happens is we need to be the guardians of that trust, knowing that the AI tools that we provide and we vouch for are trustworthy. They have the data protected. They are unbiased. They have ethical limitations and guardrails and so on. And that's extremely important, because more and more, seeing from the Anthropic's example, where saying no to a $200 million contract made them the #1 ranked app on the App Store, and now everybody is using Claude. And of course, also because of its power, but also because of the branding and the power of the brand and of a trustworthy brand, much trustworthier than OpenAI, which rushed on the same day, a couple of hours after tweeting, we got the Pentagon contract, without, saying very explicitly whether they are, keeping these AI guardrails on, and it backfired. That's also the same role we need to have within our organizations. Trust is an intangible that is more and more important. Trust is the real lubricant for collaboration. Trust is, if you remind the title of the study, the lubricant for AI humans collaboration. Our teams will feel comfort and enjoyment and will trust AI, and that's the first step in order to create an AI-first organization. So, last but not least, a small recap. Whenever we look at basically what we've gone through, the 4 big pillars of an AI-ready organization is whenever we look at a shift from reactive to predictive decision-making, we need to focus on data, and our role as CTO is being the architect of the data foundation. So there's no AI-first culture without AI-ready data. The second big thing is when we look at workflow design, we need to expand the focus from automation and be aware whenever a business area tells us we're automating everything, this is just great, that's the best I can get from AI. This is just the tip of the iceberg, because due to the productivity paradox, this is not really giving you a competitive advantage to your competition, which is doing the same. And so our role as CTO is being designer of the AI ecosystem on top of which non-technical teams are going to create their solutions. Third point, how we generate value. We pivot away from transactions using AI to improve experiences, which have much more value and customers are much more willing to pay for. And so we need to be strategic business partners. And last but not least, people. Complement the hard skills with the soft ones and being champion of human readiness and trust. And so with this, that I wanted to thank you. I think I spoke for 5 minutes more, but still we have half an hour, I guess, around half an hour of discussion. So I wanted to thank each one of you for your attention, and let's keep it up. Any question, any comments, it's open for that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for attending, guys. Thank you so much.